Hi, I'm happy to introduce another young professional working at home in town, sort of following up on Beth's theme of a month or so ago. Kelsey Dueland is here to speak with us today. Lives in North Bennington right now, works out of her home, and I'm going to leave the rest up to her to tell us more about it.
So my name's Kelsey. I've been here for about 2.5 years now. I moved here in June of 2019. I grew up in Western New York, about 4 hours from here. I went to school in Alabama, and then for hospitality, so like restaurant and hotel management. I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. Should I move this up? Okay.
You're okay.
So I went to school for restaurant and hotel management. My first job out of college was as a manager for Walt Disney World down in Florida. I worked there for several years. Then I worked for Hyatt, the Hyatt Hotels Company. I did that out in San Diego. And then in North Carolina, I worked for Shake Shack, which is actually a pretty large restaurant chain and not a little shack like my boss in Vermont thought, since he had never heard of it before. And then I moved up here. My partner actually got into Bennington College for a year-long program for people that have degrees but are now career changing and want to become doctors. Bennington offered like a 1-year program to get all of your science requirements. So we moved up here for him to do that, and I was really excited because the Taconic up in Manchester is a Kimpton branded hotel, and I was in restaurants and hotels, and this was actually a really great opportunity for me. So for the first year that we lived here, I was the assistant general manager up at the Taconic in Manchester. And then COVID happened, and I had to lay off my entire staff and kind of go through all of the rigmarole of closing the hotel, coming up with the safety plans, and then reopening the hotel when that was allowed again by the governor. And really what I did with the kind of month and a half that because I laid everyone off and then I laid myself off, right? And that was the first time, I think, in my professional career that I actually had a moment to think about what I wanted to do and what was important to me. And I was able to actually volunteer for one of the first times since my career never really allowed that, right? I was working 10, 12-hour days up in Manchester, commuting back here, and then all of a sudden I had this time on my hands. So during COVID, I was able to get involved with some of the resources in place to help elderly people that couldn't go out and grocery shop. So I would go out and grocery shop for people, and I was able to do some of the meal prep for the homeless families that were in motel that needed meals. So I went to, I think it's Grace Christian or something. There's a school that was doing a bunch of prep, and we would make meals and box them up and have them delivered. And then the hotel reopened, and I realized that maybe this isn't what I want to do for 10 to 12 hours a day, right? I'd rather do something more impactful for my community. And I left the hotel, and I actually have been working for PAVE for the last year. And I still volunteer there, but my partner is applying to med school, since that was the whole purpose of us coming here. So eventually we'll go wherever his med school ends up being. So an opportunity came up for me to work fully remotely, and I jumped at it, because now if and when we get into med school, or he gets into med school, I'll be able to continue to support that. So that's kind of the very long and convoluted way as to how I ended up here and what I do here. So I'm still involved with PAVE. That's still something that I volunteer for frequently. I really enjoyed working for that, and it was a great opportunity for me to start getting involved in the community. For the first year that I lived in Bennington, or in North Bennington, I didn't know anyone, I didn't meet anyone, I didn't go out and do anything really, because I just worked a lot, and I worked up in Manchester, so I didn't get a chance to meet community partners here. My role at PAVE was all about getting to know the community, so I had a much better opportunity to do that over the last year and a half of my time here. I met Beth through Young Professionals. They did the croquet league here up at the country club, so that's how I met her. That's how I started to meet a lot more people. I've been involved in some different volunteer opportunities, like with Garlic Town and things like that. And my experience the first year that I was here, I would say was pretty different from the way the last year and a half has gone. Even with COVID taking up a large chunk of that, I feel like I finally had an opportunity to get to know the Bennington community in a way that I did not see or understand at all for the first year that I was here. So it's been kind of eye-opening in a lot of different ways, and I really like it. You know, I like the sense of community. I think Bennington has its challenges and Vermont has its challenges. As I think maybe the last speaker told you too, like housing is impossible here. It's really difficult. One of the schools that we're hoping for med school is UVM up in Burlington. There are no apartments. Like, I don't know where we'll live, and I think that's very true of the Bennington area as well. There are people who have heard that we're moving eventually and are already asking when so that they can get our apartment. So it's just, I think that's a pretty big struggle. And I think the lack of diversity here has been a little bit hard to adjust to. Having lived in Florida and in San Diego and North Carolina and all those places, I got used to and maybe spoiled by a wide variety of foods and peoples and things to do, and that's not always present here. I think we try to find community in the ways that we can, and there are ways that Bennington provides that, but I think that that's an area that could hopefully continue to expand as we draw more and more people to the area. So that's me. I don't know if anybody has questions. Yes.
So can you just explain a little bit about the company you work for?
Yeah.
And the online-ness
Sure.
of it?
So I work for a company called Installation Made Easy, and what we do is support the installation of like home improvement purchases made at big box retailers. So we partner with Lowe's or BJ's, if anybody has been to like a BJ's club. If you go there and you're like, hey, I want a water heater and I want someone to install it for me, my company provides the software that connects you with the person that does the installation of that water heater and kind of coordinates the purchase and installation from a software and finding the people to do it perspective. So a lot of what my job is helping my company launch new programs for those relationships. So like helping launch new programs at Lowe's. We're expanding into the Canadian market right now, so a lot of my time is spent building new programs for Canada. I do all that from my one-bedroom loft apartment, which is not that fun, but it works. The internet, I know you had asked me about internet connection earlier. I don't actually have much of an issue with my internet because I'm pretty stationary, but I can't work from anywhere else. Work from home for me really means work from home. And it's tough for me to drive anywhere or be anywhere that isn't home if I want to be readily available for my job, or I volunteer for the PAVE hotline, and that's all done via cell phone. I don't know if you guys knew that, like the domestic violence hotline will call my personal phone, but if I'm on a hotline shift, I have to make sure I'm somewhere that actually has cell service, which means like not at Hannaford or driving anywhere or, you know, that kind of thing. So that's what I do now. So, yes.
So you volunteer for PAVE?
Yes.
Their hotline? Could you tell us a little bit about how that works and what your experiences have been?
Yeah, so for about a year I was their outreach advocate and volunteer coordinator. So it was actually my job to make sure we had enough volunteers for the hotline and to represent PAVE in the community. And then now that I've moved on from that role, I'm a hotline volunteer. And what that means and what we ask of any of the hotline volunteers is that they take about 4 shifts a month. You do it from your home or wherever you can find cell service, and basically what you are is kind of on call. So we have a centralized hotline number that when someone calls the hotline, they actually get an answering service. So someone is in crisis and they call the hotline, they get an answering service, and the answering service tells them, someone will reach out to you, what's the best contact number for us to reach you at, right? And they disconnect that initial call, and then they call the volunteer who's on call for that shift, and say, hey, I have so-and-so, they're experiencing this, can you please call them at this number? And then the volunteer calls them and offers whatever support might be needed, which a lot of times is emotional support, sometimes is emergency housing, and the volunteers are empowered to provide that emergency housing through a network of motel and hotel relationships we have here in town. Or sometimes it might be a little bit more complex, and they get connected with one of the advocates that's in the office if it's during those regular working hours. The hotline for PAVE, which is the domestic violence hotline here in town, domestic violence, sexual violence, all that kind of thing, is 24 hours, so it's almost entirely run by volunteers. It's only kind of during those Monday through Friday working hours that you might be connected with an advocate. So if anybody's interested in volunteering for the PAVE hotline, we could use some. So that's my little plug right there. But yeah, it's not a huge time commitment. Something else that we do as volunteers is if someone presents at SVMC for a sexual assault examination, we offer emotional support during that time as well, because that can be a pretty overwhelming experience and a pretty long one. So during COVID, we were able to do that over the phone, even though visitors weren't allowed. And now they've opened it back up to allow people in person if that kind of support is requested, or we can just sit and talk to you on the phone too while you're waiting for the doctor to come in or whatever it might be. So, yes.
Circling back to your experience as a new person,
Sure.
how it took a while to find community. Looking back, is there anything you could think of that, gee, this would have been a good idea? I wish. For instance, we just heard about a new baby welcome package.
Mhm.
That's been around.
Is there something that you know now that exists that you wish you knew then?
So some of it I knew existed, like young professionals I knew existed, the Shire's Young Professionals Organization, but I couldn't make any of the meetings, I couldn't do any of the things because my work schedule was so demanding. So part of it was me being able to make a lifestyle change to allow for myself to become more connected. Something that they're trying to launch in that organization that I think would be really great is like a welcome wagon program where members of the young professionals can put what their interests are and if they're interested in welcoming new people to the community. And then when new people come and are kind of funneled into that organization, they can get matched up to kind of help welcome someone into Bennington and show them around. What I'll say is pretty much all of my friends and acquaintances and things that I have here that I'm socializing with are all new. They're all transplants. And we all kind of like feed each other the tips about the town as we figure them out. So having that network has been a huge difference in my experience. And I wish that I would have been able to take advantage of it before COVID hit. But I couldn't at the time, so. And then COVID. The other thing is, so for me, like I play sports. I do soccer at the indoor facility here in town. And over the summer played like some outdoor pickup and things like that. Some of the larger cities that I've been in have a lot more organized support for that, for people who are looking for ways to meet other people. That's not like at a bar or, at work. There's not a lot of that here. Not a lot of supported like social activity for people looking to get to know other people. So that would be nice. Yes.
So I'm going back to your PAVE.
Please. Yeah.
Do you train? Is there training for someone?
There is training, yeah. So that's part of what my role was, and now that role is staffed by a woman named Lonnie Myron. But you go through about 20 hours of training, which we can hold via Zoom. That's how my entire experience was, doing everything via Zoom. But yeah, so basically it'll educate you on the basics of domestic violence, right? What are the root causes behind it? What can we do about it? What does it mean to be an advocate? What is sexual violence? And then how do you handle these kind of difficult or complex situations that can come up on the phone? What is really important to PAVE, and what I think is hard for those who are supporting people experiencing violence, is that the person who is experiencing the violence has to be ready and willing to accept help or take steps. Sometimes we want to like jump in and solve everything for someone, and that's not always the most effective way to help them get out of their situation, because they'll usually just end right back up in it if you push them further than they're willing to go. So a lot of advocacy is listening, offering support, and allowing the survivor to make their own choice. And that's what we talk about in training. But yeah, if you were to become a volunteer for PAVE, you'd go through that training prior to ever taking a shift. And then you go from there, so yeah, exactly. Yes.
So I had the opportunity to eat at Copper Grouse.
Yeah.
Awesome place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my experience with that hotel. Also kind of wandering around in the lobby there a little bit.
Yep.
It's so beautiful.
Yes.
So Manchester is a town that relies a lot on hospitality industry, tourism. What are they doing right? What lessons do you think Bennington can take away from your experience in Manchester?
Money. There's
Okay.
a lot of it. So for those of you, the way the Taconic works is it's owned by a group of owners, like an investment company, a couple other people. It's just like a group of like 5 or 6 people actually own the building, and it's managed by Kimpton, which is a hospitality management group that has chains of hotels all over the place, right? And so when I worked for the Taconic, I didn't work for the owners, I worked for Kimpton. And that's how it is with those larger hotels up there, is these management groups are who actually like staff and run it, and then the owners are not even there. They're not usually present. They're just, this was an investment property for them. Getting names like that are able to run those things is a big part. Kimpton has a pretty loyal and large following base of people that are willing to pay a lot of money to stay there, I guess, is the best way to put it. But I would say that the staffing struggles that I experienced as a leader there are exactly what you would experience here in Bennington. They maybe are just hiding it a little bit better. So the only way we were able to make it through some of our peak seasons was by bringing in, I'm going to use the wrong letters. Basically special seasonal visas like the ski mountains do, where they bring in seasonal help from out of the country for ski season. That's how we made it through the fall and the summer, was by doing the same thing, which in order to do that, you have to be able to find and provide housing for those people. And that in and of itself in Manchester is just as hard as it is here, but maybe from a more financial perspective. But there's just not, even before COVID, I did not have the appropriate staffing levels for the hotel to run as it should. And now even after COVID is over, I imagine that those struggles remain. So it's just a newer building, which makes it look really pretty. But behind the scenes, people are working a lot of hours to make it happen, so. Yes.
Now, you were drawn here by your relationship.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you see Bennington ever being a place where people that can work anywhere they want to work would come? Is there enough infrastructure here?
I don't think so. I think that people are coming right now from New York City and things like that. I've met a few people who are like, oh yeah, I was in the city and my job's remote, so now I'm here. I think we've reached capacity for that at this point because there's nowhere for them to live. There's no cell service if you leave your home, which is silly as that may sound, and at first it's kind of quaint and you're like, oh yeah, nobody has to get in touch with me. No, they actually kind of do if you want to be successful in your career or other things. There's not as diverse of, I like food, I like to eat, there's not as many different opportunities for people to find ethnic food or international food or that kind of thing. So I would love to say that it could happen, and it probably still will, but I mean, you can't find an apartment and you can't buy a house, so I don't think there's any way for anybody else to come at this point, Yes.
Culture and diversity, that's what
Yeah.
I miss the most of all the places I've lived. I've been here 37 years and I do miss the diversity.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a shock, like when you first get here, and everyone that I'm close with here now also moved from a more populated city, and it's quaint and it's excellent in a lot of ways. I went to the North Bennington costume parade. I love the Garlic Fest. I love everything that the town is able to do to celebrate the small town feel. But you have to be able to celebrate the small town feel while supporting big town infrastructure, right? And that's where I think we kind of fall short in making this a long-term solution for people.
Thank you.
So housing would come first?
Yeah. It's just impossible, and both affordable housing for some of the lower income people we have here in Bennington, to mid-level housing, to, like, if I think about it, right, I've never owned a home. I've moved a lot. I'm finally at a point where I'm like, okay, I could buy a house. No, I can't. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I think that's a really, really big struggle. I know, with the motel program that was in place for the homeless population over the last year, it was amazing that they had a place to stay. And at some point, you know, the question was, well, that's not the best place for them to be. Why would they want to live out of a motel room, right? I think we can all agree that a family's desired home is not a motel room. But where do you expect them to go? What other opportunity is there? What available housing is there? And the answer is there's not really any. So,
You may know more about this, but I heard recently that there's a big move to buy up homes and Airbnb them, which is, I'm assuming, affects the hotel reservations, but it also affects the housing
Yeah.
market.
It takes it out of circulation.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. if you've-
that's 100%, right? All the prices around here are super inflated from the people that are relocating, right? Either temporarily or long term, and then converting them into Airbnbs. But a real person can't do that. Like a real person who just wants to live in their home,
Right.
you know? And so that lowers the supply. And a lot of, I think, our zoning laws don't allow for some of the like apartment complexes and stuff that are not pretty, but allow for more affordable housing, you know what I mean? So it's just tough. And I'm very lucky to have found it, and it took months of searching and being the very first person to respond to a Craigslist ad to get it. So yeah, I was really nervous moving here. Because I couldn't find a place to live, and I didn't know what we were going to do. And everyone's experience that I've met that has moved here had the same one.